Hi, and welcome to the School for Ecocentric Evolution and Design Strategies. We're so happy to be back in our tiny home in Durango. And we were just getting into an interesting conversation, and we realized we'd like this to become an emergent dialogue.
Yes.
This topic was drawing us in and making us curious, so we realized might as well just turn the camera on, practice process over product, and enjoy the terrain of this conversation with all of you. So here we go. What were we talking about? I'm kind of serious. Yeah.
No, we were talking about this real humbling process that we both feel like we're in, and how this project is really part of that humbling process. Like feeling like we have a lot to share and have a lot of things that have come to us and insights that we've gleaned over the last few years, and starting to speak them and starting to speak the vision of seeds into being and share it feels like it adds this next level of commitment. It requires this next level of commitment to the practice of embodiment, right? And this is something that we really have put as like a keystone pillar as part of our seeds design process, as part of our sharing the message, sharing this project with the world is really that it all has to have this feedback loop to, are we living what what we're saying?
Yes.
Is it felt? Is it embodied? You know, if not, then let's like stay in that space. Let's figure out how it becomes living, and then continue sharing if that's what wants to come through. And so I was experiencing, I was kind of relaying to you as well, like the images or the symbols that have come to me around this, that are basically wrapped up with this whole humbling process of starting to share what we're thinking about. And that's what I feel like we use the Plotkin model of soul-centric development as a way to sort of gauge where we're at in this sort of larger life cycle of human maturation and development. And one of the stages in that, as we know, is the wanderer in the cocoon. And we've made some alterations and adjustments in this, but just to stay pure to it at this moment, it's like the wanderer in the cocoon is the time in life where one heads out and leaves behind an old life, had previously established a sense of ego identity that was acceptable to culture and to the peer group. And once that successful ego is formed, there's a deeper calling that emerges, which Plotkin calls the soul-centric development process. That they're part of our major part of our task is to cultivate soul, is to find this image that we were born with, and to let go of a previous ego identity that was born out of culture and out of our peer groups and out of, social exchanges of different kinds, and find something truly deep and authentic, and then live that deep and authentic image into the world in a way that it impacts the whole ecosystem, right? An individual living into its niche. Part of what one of the stages of developing that process is going through what he calls a wandering phase, right? And in the wandering phase, you sort of let go of the previous identity and are now in this sort of mystical, spiritual, magical, intense place with a lot of change and a lot of emotional experience and a lot of letting go and a lot of transformation. And this is considered the descent place, right? The descent to soul. And anyway, as we were talking and I was really feeling into this experience that I've had, this image that's come to me over the last year or so of like coming out of the dark forest, like coming out of the jungle, right? Which would be this transition from the wandering phase into what he calls the apprentice at the wellspring phase. And the image that arises for me is like leaving this dark, murky, mystical place where the intuition has to be the only guide, because literally the rational mind can't see above the trees.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a non-linear path of discovery. It's where we cultivate our inner intuition and the sense of mystery and magic. And so then I felt like I was coming out of this place, and that I slammed up against this mountain, this huge mountain in front of me, and realizing that I'm at this point of the greatest challenge of my life. And even though I feel like the past years were really hard in their own way, this provides a unique invitation of challenge, where that intuition now meets with and marries itself to the rational mind, and they two work together to live soul into the world, you know. Yeah, so
yes, and it's an exhilarating process to be in, to look up and see that mountain, and to know that it will be a lifelong task to be able to keep moving upward. And like that idea of like the every step like thus extends the path.
Yes.
What is the exact hermetic, right?
Yeah, no, yeah, it's there's a few, you know, it's like, yeah, every step but it extends the goal, you know, and every step up the mountain but heightens the mountain.
Yes, exactly.
Basically the simple definition, the simple interpretation of that is just like the path always lengthens. There's never an arrival. The mountain is never conquered. There's always another mountain. And every step you take, right, in the developmental process, you can see further, you can feel deeper, and therefore there's more to let go of. There's more to say yes to.
Exactly. And so drawing upon that kind of wisdom, when I hear you talk about the metaphor of this mountain peak that sort of sets the landscape of this apprentice at the wellspring, this living soul into culture task that Bill Plotkin outlines, I think of that, and I think of how Plotkin has the access point between the wanderer and the cocoon, and the apprentice at the wellspring being what he calls the kind of initiation, crossroads, threshold, that is like a portal between. And we think about what does that word mean, and what can it mean, and in what ways is it an invitation? Because when I think about the mountain always extending as we cross over this threshold of initiation, I think too of how initiation, it's both like an encounter with soul, a way of knowing oneself more deeply, more wholly, but it also is a never-ending, step-by-step, daily, momentary process of choosing a way of being that is ever expanding the self. So it's like to recognize it as like, yes, there are ways to hold these ceremonies and support an initiation process, and that's so vital and so needed and so missing in our culture. And this process that we both locate ourselves in this model is a continual process of initiatory impulse and choice and humbling surrender. And I feel like, this whole conversation is illuminating to me that sometimes it can feel just so big, and I can feel really doubtful of, am I living what I know to be true? Am I living what I have seen to be aspects of this soul image into the world in a way that does justice to the nature of the times and honors this one precious life, and is commensurate with what is being invited and really asked of each of us as we step into more awareness and more consciousness of the invitation of what it is to be human right now.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so what I hear in that, you know, there's a couple of things you said that I think are really telling of this transitional phase, right? Of actually what is the different orientation when you're in stage 4 versus stage 5. Stage 4, wandering the cocoon. Stage 5, apprentice at the wellspring. And you use this word choicefulness, right? There's a choicefulness and a recognition of the bigness. And that every moment is a choice, and how big that is. And there's deeper and deeper levels of choicefulness now, and there is no real option for deferring one's power anymore. And this is really where what initiation is. It's the full recognition of one's capacity for sovereignty, right? So it's like there's a taste of sovereignty, but it's not real sovereignty. Like the actual initiation phase, and this is where we talk about, there's been a metaphor used of like a butterfly in a cocoon, then transcending into a butterfly, where I actually think that isn't necessarily the image of the transformation of an initiation, because you suddenly don't just have butterflies, wings, and are just like flapping around and life is easy.
Right. Exactly.
It's the recognition of choicefulness in each moment, which is likened to climbing a mountain. Right? It's like, okay, we're actually on a knife edge ridge, because I've come into a sense of reality. And collectively, we're at this moment.
And I've chosen to accept the responsibility as an adult in this situation that we have collectively created and are now encountering about what is true.
Right.
And that's the knife edge.
That's the knife edge, So you're encountering that and then realizing your own capacity for sovereignty and choicefulness in that, and how big that is to really be an agent, life conscious of itself, inside of itself, capable of imagining future possibilities and taking responsibility for growing those into being. It's like life is imagining its future through us, because we are life.
Yes, exactly.
And so what does it mean to actually be in service of that now, instead of victimized against from anything around us? It's like Yes. And in that process, it's like, wow, I feel a lot better at visioning or dreaming or feeling or knowing on some level the possibilities of what this more beautiful world could be. But oh my goodness, this process of moving vision into form, of grounding reality, of rooting reality into shape, into tangible experience from what I know to be true, is just this humble human task. And so to talk about, like, we are conscious agents of life itself, here to serve life into the future, it's like, damn, that's a lot to live into. And I feel like I'm falling so short of that full possibility, and yet how beautiful. I get to keep striving. I get to keep holding and healing and bettering myself to be of service to that mission or that cause. Right. Because when you really feel into it, you're like, that's so big, right?
Yeah.
Wait, that's actually eternal.
Yeah, totally.
And when you get to that place that, whoa, like, if I am life, inside of life conscious of itself, and as far as what we scientifically know about the universe, it's in this expanding state where there doesn't seem to be an external constraint that would keep it from eternally growing.
Right.
Maybe there is, maybe there isn't. But the capacity just to imagine in that way and say, like, oh, I am that inside of that. And because I'm conscious, I could actually design for and imagine and place myself into a harmonious relationship with myself, right? With life all around me, to actually help life's process of eternally becoming, right? To actually increase the likelihood of its eternal process of unfolding. So this is actually life through us, growing the capacity to become more evolutionarily capable.
Yes, exactly. And we see this in a healthy ecosystem. We see that niches are filled, and as those niches are filled, life just intuitively creates new and different niches that are far more complex and fill in higher level or higher order functions, which is incredible. And so we can extrapolate that that's just a component of what life does, since we see that around ourselves in the natural world. And then since we have arisen from life, we can make that assumption and conclusion that we too, as we can see through the formation of these extraordinarily exquisite vehicles and tools of the human body and the mind and the self-reflective mind, that we have this natural ability as human beings, as life, as conscious life, to actually continue that process as well and be part of that process as well, of the complexification and adaptability of intelligence into more and more spaces and more roles and functions, and to be a conscious agent and work with in coherence and in harmony. That's really the ultimate dream of the universe as it's known through us.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I love that, just like listening to you and watching you. It's like, it's so full of so much excitement, right? It's so full of so much possibility. And that's why it also holds its opposite, right? And that's the whole point, is that when we expand our imagination and bring it in line with the reality of what is, but then grow that potential into the most harmonious, beautiful possibilities that we could imagine, and then realize that we as a collective have actually been just following our own imagination. Like, we keep projecting out into the future different possibilities through our stories, our media, our movies, all sorts of different things, and we just follow that trail along. And we've been doing that actually consciously, but unconsciously on some levels too, of the effects of the path that we've been taking, right? And of the actually meaninglessness of the path that we've been taking, and the effects of that. And so when you step into different possibilities, like the one you expressed, you know, like this life's meaning, like living through us and us being a part of that, so much excitement lives there, and the contrast of the current moment is so strong, and our own capacities to live into that, obviously, because it's a multi-generational eternal process of becoming. And so, but you're excited not because all of that, like, not because you're excited because you can feel all of that future, right? Not just because of this life, this one life that this form will live, but because if we actually do that now, collectively, together, plant the seeds of new possibilities to be grown into the world that actually align us with life and help life's own evolutionary process continue eternally in more and more beautiful ways. Like, if we start to lay the foundations of that, we know that eternally becomes. And so we're all part of that. Every single one of us is part of that, which is the most amazing and meaningful experience to be connected to.
Yes, exactly. And so that way of orienting and continually orienting, as we've talked about, is actually a way, even conceptually, of helping to weave ourselves back into deep and sacred relationship with life itself and one another in this process, knowing that invitation to see our impact and the role of our engagement as having these rippling effects for ourselves and one another and the future generations weaves us back into this web of life that is, it crosses deep time, and it has the breadth of all human division that can move beyond and bypass any sense of separation in a recognition of all that communes us and connects us to one another.
A recognition that, like, you are that.
Yes, exactly. A seeing yourself in the other.
In everything that is, because you are an emergent result of all of that. Of all of it, right? We are actually standing on the edge of this evolutionary moment, right? Moving through time.
Yes.
Like, just like sit and meditate and feel
being on the crest of this wave.
The amount of energy and how quickly and how deeply time moves, like our experience is moving. And we are an emergent result of that movement at this moment of time. A ripple on the river of becoming.
Yes, and I think sometimes the collective crises can feel so big that there's really this impulse, sort of that fight, flight, freeze, appease response, that survival reptilian response of things are not okay.
Yeah.
Things are really out of whack and deeply conflicted and threatened and at stake. Life itself is at stake. And so how do we show up in that way? And that can be so easy to assume that that means in some reactive way, a standing against or standing for. And not that those things are important, but also the importance of being able to actually slow down enough to feel the movement and the life and the evolutionary impulse that is just moving through us somatically and genetically, biologically, energetically, spiritually, to be able to actually try to feel that and then have that inform our actions, to have that inform the ways that we choose to engage with our life and one another, and what seeds we plant in the ground of the future world.
Yeah, that's really amazingly said. It's like the intelligence of the now.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
There's so much intelligence in the now. Like, just look around at the complexity that is allowing for your emergent conscious experience to actually take place. And how much of you how much are you doing that? You in the sense of this, you in the sense of this like conscious part of ourselves, right?
Yes.
And so all of it is happening, and it's all co-creating the possibilities for all of it to continue to exist.
Yes.
And so weaving ourselves back into the moment, and that's where all of that intelligence lives.
Yes.
It's fully alive in the present moment, right? Because that's where the information is. That's where the data is. That's where life gets feedback from itself in order to continue to emerge and evolve in more complex, harmonized, organized, balanced, dynamic ways.
Yes, because the current moment is the full expression of the cause that then is creating that effect. So we actually get to see the underlying causes in their expression, their form of the effect in the present moment. And then that information, like you're talking about, can be across the spectrum from what we might think of as like positive and negative, although it's not on that binary system, but this sense of like, oh wow, those are really clear indications of what we're having source or root our ways of being internally and societally are not, that's not a good way to root our being. Like the effects of that cause, that the effects of that way of being or that structure or that belief pattern is causing death and decay and suffering and strain. And there are ways that the present moment in all of the bounty and harvest of what's being produced is showing us those are pure and good seeds. Those are seeds that have abundance and can help support what we know to be true and possible.
Yes. And like that, in that moment, right? That's the seed image.
Yes.
That we talk about, and that's where the entire past is like we're waking up to cause and effect, like you were speaking to. And part of what we're waking up to is a multi-generational causal chain of separation, like that is having effects that are being passed down generationally that we're waking up to. And waking up to it is all that data that has been for so long saying this isn't actually leading us in a good direction. Our bodies are deteriorating. Our psychological well-being is crumbling. Our sense of anxiety, depression rates, all sorts of things have been arising within the collective field, but have been repressed and have been ignored and have been pushed away for a certain progress narrative of leading towards something. Now, you can't argue that wasn't needed, because that's where we are now.
Right.
But where we are now, when we awaken to the moment, all of that repression is there in our bodies, right?
Yes.
And each of us feel this in different and unique ways, but that is there. So we're interrupting that flow, so that basically responding to an evolutionary feedback loop that is saying we got to go and try a new direction. And so, yeah, like that present moment, that seed holds the past, but all of that information is what actually informs the future.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and so that's where the future and the past live,
Mm-hmm.
is in the present moment. So that's where all the information for life's own evolutionary process resides,
mm-hmm.
and stays. And when we bring our conscious awareness into that place, we tap into that deep intuitive reservoir
mm-hmm.
of actual wisdom,
mm-hmm.
embodied wisdom, that we can become consciously participating with, interacting
mm-hmm.
with, communicating with.
Yes.
And this is something that we are just on the edge of, on the verge of. And not to say that we haven't had this in the past, I'm just speaking for where we are collectively at this moment, on the verge of being able to explore collectively, how do we engage
mm-hmm.
with our unconscious,
mm-hmm.
with our subconscious, with this deep evolutionary intuitive wisdom that resides in every cell of our being. How can we communicate with that on an individual level? How can we feel more deeply, right? That's what I'm saying. It's like, feel what is, and allow
mm-hmm.
that to then guide in an intuitive way, and use the rational to actually keep us in balance and in check, and connected to the physical plane as well, and connected to future possibilities, and calculating risk. All that's really important, but there's this deep intuitive process that we also need to sink back into.
mm-hmm.
And that is there. That is so alive.
Yes.
In every moment.
Yes. I really hear you speaking to how do we really bring this unconscious collective experience of the pain and suffering and separation and all of this feedback that's letting us know that we are not on a path that can be life sustaining and life enhancing. We're on a self-terminating path. How do we take that information from the unconscious collective realms and actually bring it into our conscious awareness and allow then the relationship between the mind and the intuitive ways of knowing to be in synchronicity and in coherence, so that then we can actually reorient towards a pathway that's not self-terminating.
Yes.
It's like we've come up against the edge of a cliff.
Yes.
And it's nobody's fault. We kind of needed to know that that was where a cliff was,
right,
so that we could reorient in a different direction. But we can see through all of the signs and symptoms that it's very clear the way we're living right now, the way we're extracting from the earth, the way we're disrupting climate and ecosystem. We are living in a world that incentivizes our own self-destruction and our own termination. And as soon as we can actually allow that to be known and felt and encountered, then we can reorient in directions that are informed by that way of being and that way of knowing, in ways that can truly be life nourishing and life enhancing.
Yes. I really appreciate the directionality that you brought into this experience of like moving in a certain collective direction and evolutionarily exploring that, and now getting strong feedback that's saying, hey, can't keep going in this direction, which is like great.
Yeah, we know more of the terrain now.
We know more of the terrain now. We can try something new
territory.
Because we're life that wants to just continue living and keep creating the best possible scenario and circumstances for ourselves that we can. So of course we're going to listen to that feedback and start moving in a different direction.
Yes.